In this last section, we hear that there's no magic algorithm to use to predict how successful a show launch will be. It's really about using the data, understanding it, and knowing when and how to course correct. Jed Neal at Esquire also tells us it's no longer just about the opening night. Now we're in the business of building a franchise. Therefore, as marketeers, it's essential that we take all of the data and the know-how so that we can fuel the energy and drive shows beyond their launch date and into becoming an audience favorite.
And Laurie and Jon, what's the one key piece of data marketers should be looking at? Is there one?
No. No, I wish there was, I don't know, some kind of golden algorithm that you could use to predict the launch of, the successful launch. But there's nothing. You just got to know your audiences really, really well.
I agree. I think it's intuition, which has always existed in marketing, and knowing who do you think the audience is going to be, and then backing it up with the data and the research piece, and being able to actually solidify and even uncover something that maybe you didn't expect. Maybe there's another aspect of the target that you didn't identify, or there's another way in which you can reach out to them. So I think it's always going to be a combination of both. You need first to start with that gut instinct, and then build upon that with all of the data and the assets that is available.
But just be aware that sometimes the gut instinct can be wrong, and you've got to be able to course correct.
Well, I think that's the key thing, is actually finding the time in the craziness of our schedule to look at a campaign and see what was successful, is to look at conversion and what environments converted at the highest rate. We're usually moving on to mid-season and now spring and then summer. I mean, we are on a full calendar year. How do you take the time and really make that a priority to understand what worked? How do you attribute all the media touch points back to the success or failure of a show? How do we link all those media sort of assets together to create an understanding of what is working and why does it work, and how can we do more of it?
I think one of the best ways that we as marketers too, to build on Angela's point, is to really use the data and understand it. We're in a day and age when a fall schedule is coming up, or a big summer for us, and you have many different parties and many different products to launch. But we're in the business of building franchises now, not just opening nights. And so our job has to be about more than just the first night, and how we use data to get people into the shows after a second, third episode, and even after a first season. Sometimes first seasons are out there and you've got a show that's a medium hit. How do you fuel that energy and fire? How do you take all of that data so that you're stoking that and getting that out there? Because it is hard to break through in season one, in first episodes. And I think we're all crazy if we think that we're all going to be successful with that. So how do we think about how we're building franchises and using the data to drive it past the first episode, past the the third, and then in between seasons if you've had some success or some interest with a particular audience?
We've seen so much success in working with marketers who are coming to us and saying, okay, we've got second week, third week, we need to figure out how we're going to course correct, how we're going to turn this around. We've seen in social that there's a lot of buzz against this particular audience segment. Can you go back in there and get them? And that is something that we've definitely worked very closely with our marketing partners on, in helping identify where those opportunities are and how you can. How do you create the pre-awareness and the buzz, and how do you monopolize that for the premiere? And then how do you build and change week after week to grow the audience? Because like you're saying, it's great to get them there for that first episode, but if they don't stay because they have so many choices anywhere else, it's not going to work. So it's continuing to build throughout that season, and then taking those learnings and taking it to the next year.
It's also a really important partnership with your development teams. You think about people come back after season one, they want the cliffhanger, they want the payoff, and then what do you do to keep them there at the end of the episode? I always say it's not just about what we're paying off, it's what we're starting to seed for the future episodes. And if you can do that over the first couple episodes, so say 1, 2, and 3, you've really got them hooked. They're making an investment. So it's a partnership with research and marketing and development to say, how can we make a show that has the right beats, that keeps people excited and gives them a moment to share in social? And I think one of the things that I'm sure we're all looking at is, how do we look at sentiment, really understand sentiment in every moment of our show? Because you can literally take a moment that is popping in social and feed that into a promo right after the show to drive C3 and C7, because those are the moments that your fans told us matter to them. So you can really begin to think about programming and development and marketing now working together holistically.
In a marketplace that's so crowded when there are so many shows, I'm sure we've all experienced shows that you were passionate about that just didn't find an audience. Can you talk about an experience and what you learned from that?
I would talk about, one that is near and dear to my heart, Togetherness, which was like a small but gem of a show that we all really loved. And the problem in, sort of creating a really big audience, and look, the show, got an audience, again, who was very passionate about it, and I think it had, was incredibly well received. And sometimes you have something that on the face of it, it's a domestic story about a couple and family and kids, and it looks sort of very familiar. And actually, I think the show had a very special voice and was just so funny and so poignant, and that's what made people really love it. But sometimes when the elements, there's nothing there that you can say, look at this, this is the differentiator that's obvious. It was challenging, particularly in key art, to give an image or something that really said what was so special about this show.
Just as a consumer, you look at shows, like an Unreal or Togetherness, which I was a huge fan of, and you think I really hope they find a way to keep these shows alive, because I know the audiences are small, but the content is great. And I even look at what Nashville was able to do and sort of moving to CMT. It's like if the fans are there and if they can rally behind it and the business makes sense, behind the scenes, then I hope that, we are able to continue to create content and allow audiences to consume it. If it's not going to work on our air, where can it go? And we see this in small things. It's even just looking at how to excerpt pieces of content from our successful shows and place them in environments where they can almost have a life of their own. The world is such that content is finding a home. The economics are such that it has to find a lot of homes to live on.
This goes to the programming decisions that are made at Showtime. It's a carefully curated collection of culturally relevant shows, and for some more than others, you want bigger audience. Well, you want bigger audiences for all of them, but some, of course, you'd like to see greater gains from season to season. So that's where we focus. That's the practice. It's how do we sustain throughout the season? How do we keep activity resonant and relevant off season, so that when we come back, we might see some greater gains, and we've done a pretty good job at doing that. So I don't really want to cite any examples of shows that haven't delivered, because I just can't think of one at the moment.
What platform has provided you the biggest challenge in the past year?
I love Snapchat. I think it's a great platform for a lot of our audiences, but I think it's also, they are working on the right ad model as well as content model. And so in the very beginning of those, we all went through it with Facebook and with Twitter and, MySpace in the old days. But it's just, how does the model that you need in order to put forth the money you want to invest in it deliver an ROI that is, one, measurable, and two, can be linked back to the success or lift of a show?
I think Snapchat's a great example, and it really also speaks to that you need to take the platform's lead in terms of what their audience wants. And we had a lot of conversations early on with Instagram about that, and it was like, ads don't work well. Now, over time, they figured out ways to sort of incorporate that, and I think Snapchat just announced that they're going to also have more advertising able to work with within the platform. So I think it's that mix of wanting something that really feels organic and right to the platform and for the audience in a way that they want to consume it, but also still getting our message across, and we're not just, there to be there.
And I think with the platforms, when you're looking at it, it's which platforms have video content, which platforms have your opportunities and abilities to stream things live. So a lot of the platforms are just coming along with that technology to be able to let us showcase our content or our live shows in the best ways. One of the areas I think that we've grown in is our partnership with Facebook for our e-news platform. We now have e-news live on Facebook Live. A year ago, that could have been a challenge for us. How do we have that conversation with them about being able to do live shows? And now we're able to do that. So how are we looking at all these partners and saying, how are we able to put our best product out there that's going to resonate in the best way?
When these platforms are introduced, the ROI is almost impossible.
Yeah.
It's impossible. They're priced out of ether. You don't really know what the valuation is going to be. Remember, we have reams and reams of data on more traditional media and reams and reams of data on digital media. Digital media is not new anymore. So we're very careful about ROI. The other thing is, you know, we all have these social media focus groups at home. Everybody on this panel and probably everybody in the audience has a focus group at home, and you watch what happens. So in my house, I have a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old, and their digital or social habits couldn't be more different. And there's only a 2-year spread. Then I've got older children from the first season of my married life, and completely different. They're closer, they're a little bit closer, but even their habits are different. So when you talk about video consumption on these platforms, you have to remember, that's the one thing they all have in common. You have to remember, we're in the film to entertainment business. This is what we do. And the best way to tell our stories is through video.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to end it there. Thank you so much to the panel.
Thank you, guys.
All of you.
Thank you.